Imagine handing your child a device, not realizing you've just invited predators, exploitation, and hidden dangers into your home. It might feel like it couldn't happen to you, but this is the reality countless parents just like you face daily, and it's what happened to me. Today we're going to dive into 5 urgent online safety stories that have emerged in the past 7 days. Stories you may not have heard, but you need to know. Hi, I'm Alicia Kozak. I was the first child abducted by an internet predator, and for over 20 years I've made it my mission to protect families from the evolving dangers online. From speaking in schools to educating the public through the media, from work at law enforcement and shaping critical legislation, I've dedicated my life to making the digital world safer. This first story is truly disturbing, but it's so important, and it demonstrates both the horrors of online exploitation and the incredible power of international collaboration. In a significant breakthrough, federal authorities recently arrested 2 young men, Prasan Nepal, who's only 20, in North Carolina, and Leonidas Varganias, who's 21 and living in Greece, but a US citizen, for being leaders of the global child exploitation network known as 764. Law enforcement has described this network as one of the most extreme and horrifying child abuse enterprises ever uncovered online, targeting young girls from across the globe. The online group coerced young girls into self-harm and produced horrifying materials which they called lore books. These combined child sexual abuse images with extreme violence. This group wasn't only sharing illicit images, they functioned like a cultic online community, drawing in members who traded in graphic child abuse content and reinforced their crimes with extremist ideologies. The group promoted and demanded acts of self-harm, anal abuse, humiliation, and coercion. They targeted young girls and horrifyingly sometimes even involved their siblings in this abuse. The members referred to themselves as lore keepers, and their lore books became a form of dark currency within the group. These lore books, though, they weren't randomly shared. They had to be earned. Members had to produce or solicit more content to gain access to new material, creating a cycle of abuse, shame, and blackmail that trapped the victims even deeper over time. These girls were manipulated through fake peer accounts, gradually drawn into increasingly dangerous conversations and private chats. What's especially alarming is the calculated psychological nature of this abuse. Once a child complied with one demand, the predator would use threats, fear, and embarrassment to force them to go even further. The content wasn't just shared. It was archived, it was categorized, and it was weaponized. This was coordinated, and the victims were often too young or too terrified to ask for help. The perpetrator's arrest highlights the alarming reality that perpetrators of such heinous acts can be individuals who, on the surface, appear to be ordinary young adults. These were not shadowy figures operating quietly. They were young adults leveraging modern technology to spread unspeakable harm worldwide. Their apprehension was the result of extensive international cooperation among law enforcement agencies, highlighting the importance of cross-border collaboration in combating online child exploitation. But despite the darkness of the story, there is a powerful takeaway. International cooperation between law enforcement agencies, it works. These arrests send a clear and hopeful message that predators will be pursued relentlessly, no matter where they operate or where they're hiding. This was all possible thanks to an extraordinary collaboration between US and international law enforcement, including the FBI, Homeland Security, and Greek authorities. These partnerships remind us that the fight to protect children must cross borders, because predators certainly don't recognize them. This story is terrifying, and it reinforces just how sophisticated, manipulative, and hidden online exploitation can be. Predators don't always look like monsters. They can look like your child's peers. They don't always operate in shady corners of the dark web. They're using apps and games your kids access every single day. And it's critical that parents understand the red flags, like sudden secrecy around phones or computers, excessive screen time late at night, quickly closing windows or changing screens when approached, emotional withdrawal or unexplained anxiety after time online, and use of encrypted apps like Discord, Telegram, or Signal, especially in private channels. Please remember, even the most loving, vigilant parents can be blindsided by online predators. Our next story is a stark reminder that the platforms children love the most can also pose significant risks. What happened this past week took place on Roblox, one of the most popular games for children, when 17-year-old Christian Scriven of Marion County, Florida, was arrested for exploiting multiple young children through the platform. According to investigators, Scriven spent the past year impersonating peers, gaining the trust of children by pretending to be their age and engaging with them through games and chats. And once he built enough rapport, he directed conversations to other platforms like Discord or text messaging, spaces that are harder for parents and moderators to monitor. And once there, Scriven coerced children into explicit acts, including some as horrific as instructing them to abuse their siblings while on camera. He admitted to contacting and attempting to exploit as many as 4 to 5 children per day, using the content for his own gratification. His arrest followed a tip from the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, which led authorities to uncover his communication records and initiate a swift response. Scriven now faces adult felony charges and is being held without bond. In response, Florida's Attorney General issued a subpoena to Roblox, demanding information about its child protection policies. This signals a growing call for transparency and accountability from tech companies that operate in spaces where children gather. While platforms like Roblox do have safety measures in place, This case proves that it's not nearly enough, and that predators are skilled at working around them. This case is definitely a jarring wake-up call. When most people think of online safety, they often imagine dark corners of the internet. But what makes this story so chilling is that it happened in a place where many parents consider to be safe. Roblox is a household name. It's used by millions of children. It's marketed as educational, social, and creative. But like any platform with chat functions and user-generated content, it's vulnerable to abuse when safeguards fail, or when children aren't taught how to recognize that danger. Kids feel safe on these platforms, and that's exactly why predators target them there. Scribben, he didn't use force, he used familiarity, he posed to disappear. And that's what predators do, they manipulate trust. That's why parental involvement is key. Children trust their friends online, and they often assume other kids their age couldn't possibly do them harm. That's what makes predators like Scribben so dangerous. He looked like a friend, he acted like a peer, and he was able to abuse that trust over and over again. So what can you do? First, understand that Roblox isn't just a game, it's a community. And communities have people with both good. If your child is using Discord or texting friends from games, ask to see those conversations too. Not as punishment, not to be nosy, but as protection. You can, and also should, enable parental controls, restrict private messaging, and set up account restrictions through Roblox's settings. These aren't foolproof, but they do create roadblocks. Most importantly, keep conversations open. Let your child know that if someone makes them uncomfortable online, they can and should come to you without fear. The fact that Scribben targeted multiple children a day tells us something else. This wasn't random. This was a pattern. He had a plan, and he was a predator who knew exactly how to work the system. And as tech companies continue to grow, monetize, and expand, they must prioritize child safety. Real consequences, real moderation, and real transparency, not just PR statements after something goes wrong. As someone who spends my life educating families about these dangers, this story tells us why open, continuous conversations about online behavior are crucial. Parents must discuss privacy, they must discuss boundaries, and stranger danger in the digital age, not just once, but repeatedly. And equally important, companies like Roblox must step up their efforts and be transparent and proactive in safeguarding our children. The accountability demanded here sends a strong message to the industry. We will not accept complacency when our children's safety is at stake. And speaking of big changes, this next story brings us to the world of legislation. This week, the state of Texas took a bold and controversial step in the fight to protect children online. The Texas House of Representatives passed House Bill 18, a sweeping piece of legislation that would ban anyone under the age of 18 from creating or maintaining an account on social media platforms. If it does pass the Senate and it is signed into law, the bill would take effect as early as September 1st, 2025. Under this bill, social media platforms would be legally required to have strict age verification systems, making it significantly harder for minors to access these sites without parental oversight. It would give parents the authority to request the deletion of any existing social media account belonging to their child, a power that many parents may welcome, especially those who are already concerned about what their kids are being exposed to online. Supporters point to the many troubling trends: skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicidal ideation in teens that correlates closely with the rise of social media. The argument is clear. And as we know it, these platforms are really addictive. They're exploitive and they're largely unregulated. If minors can't legally buy alcohol or cigarettes, why should they have open access to spaces that statistically harm their well-being? And this bill has sparked a passionate debate. Opponents, including some civil rights groups and mental health professionals, say the law goes way too far. They argue that while the risks of social media are real, banning it outright for all minors could absolutely backfire. Social media isn't just entertainment, it's also how teens communicate, they express themselves, and they even learn about the world. The concern is that such a sweeping restriction could isolate vulnerable kids or cut them off from positive digital communities, mental health resources, and creative outlets. And then there's others who raise serious questions about the required age verification process. Will it involve scanning IDs? Will it be facial recognition? What data will be collected? And who will have access to it? These are the privacy issues that affect everyone, not just kids. As someone who works closely with families and survivors, I understand the motivation behind this bill. There's no question that the online world can be damaging, especially to children and teens whose brains and identities are still forming. But at the same time, this legislation raises important questions that we as parents and advocates need to consider seriously. This legislation gets at the heart of a larger question that we've been circling around for years now. What is the right balance between freedom and protection in the digital world? At what point do we step in and do we say, enough, this platform is doing more harm than good and don't have access to it anymore? For parents, this bill should be a prompt, not just to look outward at what lawmakers are doing, but to look inward at how we're guiding our kids through their digital lives. Because here's the truth. Whether this bill passes or not, your child is growing up in a world where their mental health is being shaped by screens, likes, filters, and comment sections. And while legislation can help, no law can replace the role of a parent who is engaged, informed, and willing to talk. So how do you begin that conversation? Ask your child what apps they use, not just what's on their phone, but what they're actually doing with them. Set boundaries together, create screen-free times during meals or before bed, encourage digital breaks. And it's a lot, and if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, you're not alone. Social media wasn't designed for developing brains, but millions of kids are navigating it every single day. What they need more than anything is you, your presence, your wisdom, your willingness to listen to them without judgment. So whether or not HB 18 becomes law, the bigger message is this. We are in a moment of reckoning. So what kind of online world do we want for our kids? Because right now, they're being shaped by systems we didn't build and can barely control. Change will start with awareness, with accountability, and with conversations like this one. Our next story brings us to something that has exploded in the digital world lately, and that's deepfakes. These AI-generated videos or images can look shockingly real, and when they're weaponized to exploit, threaten, or humiliate someone, especially a child, the consequences can be devastating. But just last week, Congress passed a groundbreaking bipartisan bill called the Take It Down Act. This legislation targets the spread of non-consensual intimate imagery, including content that's been altered with AI, like deepfakes. It makes it a federal crime to post or share these kinds of images without the person's consent. Even more importantly, it forces platforms to take action. They'll now be legally required to remove reported content within 48 hours of notification. And this is a really big win, because up until now, the law really hadn't caught up with technology. Victims, many of them teenagers and children, have been left helpless as their manipulated images circulated online. They went viral, they were downloaded, they were reshared, embedded into forums, chats, and websites that they didn't have control over. And unfortunately, most platforms have been really slow or outright unwilling to respond quickly, often hiding behind vague community guidelines or jurisdictional excuses. And that looks like it is ending now. This act, it was supported by major tech companies and public figures, including First Lady Melania Trump, which gave it added momentum and visibility. But what makes this law truly significant is what it means for victims. It gives them a tool, a pathway, and a voice in a space that has long ignored their pain. But here's what makes this law so urgent. Deepfake technology is advancing at a terrifying speed. What once required sophisticated software and hours of editing can now be done with a smartphone app in just seconds. And children, teens, and young adults are increasingly being targeted by fake images or manipulated videos that can humiliate, harass, and traumatize them for life. Listen, these aren't just viral pranks. They are being used as digital weapons, and they're often used to silence, shame, or extort. This isn't just a problem for influencers and celebrities. It's happening to regular kids. Classmates take innocent selfies and turn them into fake nudes. Bullies upload older videos to social media, predators threaten to release deepfakes unless victims comply with real-life demands. And unlike traditional images, deepfakes are hard to disprove. Even when the truth comes out, the damage really has already been done. So this law, it's a powerful step forward, but it's not a complete solution. It can't prevent a deepfake from being made, and it can't erase the emotional toll it takes on a victim. That's where we as parents, educators, and advocates come in. So what can you do right now? Start by educating your children about what deepfakes are and how they're used. Many young people still don't understand that an image doesn't have to be real to ruin a reputation or destroy someone's sense of safety. Talk to them about the importance of never sharing intimate content, even with somebody that they trust. That includes avoiding pressure to send just one picture or just one video. Because once something is online, even privately, it can be copied, edited, and used in ways that they never intended. And please let your child know that if they ever find themselves in this kind of situation, that they can come to you without fear. If someone is threatening them with a photo, real or fake, save everything. Report it immediately to cybertipline.org, contact your local law enforcement, and know that there are federal protections in place to support them. And finally, we must demand more from tech companies. It should not take a law to force platforms to act. Report content when you see it. Contact platforms if takedowns are delayed. Your voice matters, and pressure does work. We're living in a time when technology can be used to uplift or destroy, and the Take It Down Act sends a strong message. You do not get to manipulate, humiliate, or control someone through digital abuse. Not anymore. And this is why I always tell parents, we cannot just talk about internet safety in vague terms anymore. We have to get really specific. Our kids need to know that sending or sharing even an altered image of someone without their consent is not just cruel, it's criminal, and it's a violation of that person's body. And that brings us to our final story this week, which reminds us that even the most familiar apps can serve as hunting grounds for predators. Snapchat, well, it's used by millions of children and teens, often with minimal oversight. But its disappearing messages and private features can also make it a predator's dream. Predators just like Max Fishkind, who posed as a 17-year-old boy online, just close enough in age to seem trustworthy to his underage target. He used this false identity to befriend the child and began grooming them through private conversations on Snapchat. Grooming is a term we use often, but it's important here to pause and explain what it really means. Grooming isn't always obvious. It can look like kindness, attention, compliments, anything that makes the victim feel seen, heard, or special. That's how predators gain trust. And once Fishkind had built that kind of trust, he manipulated the child into sending explicit images. And like so many predators do, he didn't stop there. He allegedly used the images to pressure the victim into continued communication, leveraging fear and embarrassment to maintain that control. But thankfully, the story took a different turn. The victim's parents noticed that something was wrong, whether it was a shift in mood, secrecy around their device, or something else entirely. They paid attention. And when they did, they acted fast. They contacted the FBI, and investigators moved quickly. Now, Fishkind faces a potential sentence of 15 to 30 years in prison. But what about those children who don't tell? What about the ones who are too scared or too ashamed or too manipulated to speak up? That's why this story matters, because it shows us what's possible when a child has adults who are tuned in, when parents make space for difficult conversations, when they know the signs, and when they believe their child, even if it's hard to hear. That kind of presence, it saves lives. And this case really feels like a gut punch, because Snapchat, it's everywhere. It's on your kid's phone, it's in their group chats, their selfies, their weekend memories, and it feels harmless because it's designed to. The messages disappear, the streaks are really fun, the filters are silly, but behind that playful design there are features that predators depend on. Private messaging, disappearing content, and the false sense of security that no one's watching. But Fishkind, he didn't break into anyone's house, he didn't stalk anyone in person. He slipped into a vulnerable child's world through their phone, quietly, gradually, and with purpose. This is how online exploitation works. It's not loud, it's not obvious, and it's not something you can spot sometimes unless you're really looking. So ask your child how they use Snapchat. Who are they talking to? What do their friends share? What is the most uncomfortable thing that they've ever seen or received on the app? And next, make sure you understand the platform safety features. Snapchat offers things like limiting who can contact them, ghost mode, and friend verification. But many teens either don't know these settings exist or they turn them off. So sit down and go through those settings together. And really, most importantly, encourage your child to come to you if anything makes them feel uncomfortable. Even if they're scared or they think they're going to get in trouble, remind them, it is never their fault if someone manipulates them or pressures them. What matters is that they speak up and that they know you're there to help and not to judge them. And finally, you can keep reminding yourself that showing up and noticing matters. The parents in the story, they may have saved their child's life, not by knowing every tech detail, but by noticing that something felt off and refusing to ignore it. Okay, that was a lot. And this has been 1 week, just one, and these are only 5 stories. The truth is that there's always more. Each week, new cases surface. There's new victims, new tactics, and new platforms. And some of these stories, they make the news, but many others don't. And I can share so many stories with you from the audiences that I speak to. But that's why I'll be back again with this series next week, with more stories, more lessons, and more ways for you to stay informed. Because the threats aren't going to stop, but neither will we. Because when you know what's happening, you're better prepared to prevent it, or to respond to it, or stop it from spreading further. The digital world, it's always moving, it's always shifting. And if we stop paying attention, maybe for even a moment, we could risk everything. And if you're looking for more tips, more tools, and real-world strategies, check out my new book, The Internet Safety Guidebook, Protecting Kids in Digital Age. The link is in the description below. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, please take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and to subscribe to my channel. And be sure to click that notification bell for more videos so you can be aware when new dangers and new tools emerge. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Alicia Kozak. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next video.